everyone. So here is Chapter 6 of The Cricket in Times Square, Sai-Fang. Mario took the IRT local subway downtown. He held the matchbox up at the level of his chest so the cricket could see out. This was the first time Chester had been able to watch where he was going on the subway. The last time he had been buried under roast beef sandwiches. He hung out of the box, gazing up and down the car. Chester was a curious cricket, and as long as he was here in New York, he meant to see as much as he could. He was staring at an old lady wearing a straw hat, wondering if the flowers on it were real, and if they were, what they would taste like. When the train lurched to a halt, like most people who first ride the subway, Chester wasn't used to the abrupt stops. He toppled out of the matchbox into Mario's lap. The boy picked him up again. "You've got to be careful," he said, putting his finger over the open end of the box, so there was just enough room for Chester to poke his head out. At the Canal Street stop, Mario got off and walked over several blocks to Chinatown. Chester craned his head out as far as he could to get his first look at New York by day. The buildings in this part of town weren't nearly as high as they were in Times Square, but they were still high enough to make Chester Cricket feel very small. In Chinatown, as Papa had said, all the shops were closed. Mario walked up and down the narrow, curving streets, zigzagging across them so he could look in the windows on both sides. In some he saw the cardboard shells that open up into beautiful paper flowers if you put them in a glass of water, and in others, the glass wind harps that tinkle when they're hung in the window where the breeze can reach them. But he couldn't find a cricket cage anywhere. Down at the end of an alley, there was an especially old shop. The paint was peeling off the doors, and the windows were crammed with years and years' collections of knickknacks. A sign hanging out in front said, "Sai-Fang, Chinese Novelties," and printed underneath, in smaller letters, was "Also do laundry by hand." Sitting cross-legged on the doorstep was an old Chinese man. He was wearing a silk vest over his shirt with dragons embroidered on it in red thread, and he was smoking a long white clay pipe. Mario stopped and looked in the shop window. The old Chinese man didn't turn his head, but he looked slyly at the boy out of the corner of his eye. Slowly, he drew the pipe out of his mouth and blew a puff of smoke into the air. "Are you Mr. Fang?" asked Mario. The man smoothly twisted his head, as if it were on a pivot, and looked at Mario. "I'm Sai-Fang," he answered. His voice sounded strange, yet musical, like a plucked violin. Sai-Fang had come from China many years ago, and he had a curious way of talking, but Mario liked it very much. He enjoyed the individual chirps of human beings almost as much as those of his cricket. "I would like to buy a cricket cage if you have any," said Mario. Sai-Fang put the pipe back in his mouth and took a few puffs. His eyes became even narrower than they had been before. "You have a cricket?" He asked finally in a voice so soft that Mario could hardly hear it. "Yes," said Mario. "Here he is." He opened the matchbox. Chester and Sai-Fang looked at each other. "Oh, very good," said Sai-Fang, and a remarkable change came over him. He suddenly became very lively, almost dancing a jig on the sidewalk. "You have cricket! Very good!" He was laughing delightedly. Mario, startled by Sai-Fang's quick change, "I want to buy him a house," he said. "Come in the shop, please," said Sai-Fang. He opened the door and they both went in. Mario had never seen such a cluttered room. It was a jumble of Chinese odds and ends. Everything from silk robes to chopsticks to packages of hand laundry littered the shelves and chairs. And there was a faint, sweet smell of incense in the air. Sai-Fang brushed a pile of Chinese newspapers to the floor. "You sit here, please," he said, motioning Mario to the chair he had cleared. "I'll be back soon," and he disappeared through a door at the back of the shop. Mario sat very quietly. He was afraid that if he moved, he would be buried under an avalanche of Chinese novelties. In a glass case, right in front of him, was a row of Chinese goddesses, carved in ivory. They all had the strangest smile on their lips, as if they knew something nobody else did. And they seemed to be staring straight at Mario. He tried to look at them, but he couldn't keep it up and had to look away. In a few minutes, Sai-Fang came back into the room. He was carrying a cricket cage in the shape of a pagoda. There were 7 tiers to it, each one a little smaller than the one below, and it ended in a slender spire. The lower parts of the cage were painted red and green, but the spire was golden. At one side was a gate with a tiny latch on it. Mario wanted to own the cage so much that he tingled all over, but it looked awfully expensive. Sai-Fang held up the first finger on his right hand and said solemnly, This is a very ancient cricket cage. Once, the cricket who belonged to the emperor of all of China lived in this cage. Do you know the story of the first cricket? No, sir, said Mario. Very good, said Sai-Fang. I'll tell you. He set the cage down and took the clay pipe out of his pocket. When it was lit and a thread of smoke was curling up from the bowl, he used the pipe to emphasize what he said, dragging little designs like Chinese writing in the air. Long ago, in the beginning of time, there were no crickets. And here's the illustration of the shop. So you can see it's very crowded. There's all the laundry piled up. But there was a very wise man who knew all things. This man, his name was Sai Shuao, and spoke only the truth. All secrets were open to him. He knew thoughts of animals and men. He knew the desires of flowers and trees. He knew the destiny of the sun and the stars. The entire world was a single page for him to read, and the high gods who lived in palaces at the summit of the heavens loved Sai Shuao because of the truth he spoke. Now, from many lands came men to hear their fate from Sai Shuao. To one he said, You are a very good man. You live as long as cedar trees on the mountainside. To others, he would say, You're a wicked man. You'll die soon. Goodbye. But to all men, Sai Shuao speaks only truth. Of course, wicked men are most unhappy when they hear what Sai Shuao says. They think, I am a wicked man. Now everyone knows how wicked I am. So all together, the wicked men decided to kill Sai Shuao. Sai Shuao knew very well they wanted to kill him. He knows everything, but he does not care. Within his heart, like the smell of sweetness within lotus blossoms, Sai Shuao have peace, and so he waits. But high gods who live in the palace at the summit of the heavens would not let Sai Shuao be killed. More precious to them than kings was the one man who spoke only the truth. So when wicked men raised swords above Sai Shuao, the high gods changed him into a cricket. And man who spoke only truth and knew all things now sings songs, and no man understands, and all men love. But the high gods understand and smile. For to them, the beautiful song of crickets is the song of the one who still speaks truth and knows all things. Sai-Fang stopped speaking and smoked his pipe silently. Mario sat still too, looking at the cricket cage. He was thinking about the story and how much he wanted the cage. In his matchbox, Chester Cricket had listened carefully. He was very touched by the tale of Sai Shuao. Of course, he couldn't tell it if it was true, but he sort of believed it, because he personally had always thought that there was more to his song than just chirping. As usual, when he didn't know what else to do, he rubbed one wing across the other. A single clear note sounded in the shop. Sai-Fang lifted his head. A smile curled up the ends of his ancient lips. So, he whispered, the cricket has understood. He puffed a few more times. Mario wanted to ask him how much the cage cost, but he was afraid to. Because this cricket is so remarkable, said Sai-Fang. I'll sell the cage for 15 cents. Mario sighed with relief. He could afford that. In his pocket, he found a nickel and a dime, all that was left of his weekly allowance, which was a quarter. I'll take it, Mr. Fong, he said, and handed Cy Fong the money. Sam's here. I'll also make a present for free, said Cy Fong. He went behind the counter and took a little bell, no bigger than a honeybee, out of the drawer. With a piece of thread, he hung it up inside the cage. Mario put Chester into the cage. The cricket jumped up and knocked against the bell. It tinkled faintly. The sound like the littlest bell in the silver temple, far off up the Yangtze River, said Cy Fong. Mario thanked him for the bell and the story and everything else. As he was about to leave the shop, Cy Fong said, "Do you want a Chinese fortune cookie?" "I guess so," said Mario. "I never had one." Cy Fong took down a can from the shelf. It was full of fortune cookies, thin wafers that had been folded so there was an air space in each one. Mario bit into the cookie and found a piece of paper inside. He read what it said out loud. "Good luck is coming your way. Be ready."
I need that line.
Laughed Cy Fong. 2 high notes of joy. Very good advice. You can go now. Always be ready for happiness. Goodbye. And that's the end of chapter 6. So I hope you enjoyed this. And what do you think the good luck is going to be coming Mario's way?